Hello, welcome to Policy Driven, a podcast on global transport policy. My name is Thomas Jérémy Hayden-Lefebvre, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mark Watts, for this first episode of Policy Driven. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Tom. It's great to be with you and looking forward to this journey ahead today, but also the future editions we're planning.
Absolutely. So am I. So how about you start off by telling us a bit about yourself, and then we can discuss the Policy Driven podcast.
Well, I've always had a passion for transport. Well, I know that's a very unusual thing to be boasting about these days. It's not the most fashionable subject, but I can assure you it wasn't very fashionable when I began in my career in local government in London as a transport policy officer many decades ago. Since then, I've moved to Brussels, got involved in politics, but then defaulted back to the world of transport, which I find very, very exciting because to me, it's all about connectivity. How we connect with countries, economies, but communities, but above all, just ordinary people going about their daily lives. How we interact with each other relies on good transport. It's got to be safe, it's got to be sustainable, but above all, it has to work. And I'm really interested in talking about the practicalities with you, Tom, and our guests we're going to have over the months to come of how we can make transport more effective in the future.
That sounds really interesting. How long have you been working in transport? If you don't mind me aging you.
Oh my God! Well, it's probably almost close to 40 years. I should have a medal, shouldn't I? 40 years on and off in charge. There's a big gap there though for being in the European Parliament on the TRAN committee, and I'm not sure whether that's transport or not. I think a lot of it, some of it's more theatrics than transport policy, but we'll come on to that, I'm sure, later on.
Absolutely.
So on and off 40 years in transport, yeah.
That's absolutely great.
What about you, Tom? What was your intro into the world of transport and ending up editing a very, very exciting and very prestigious magazine now?
So yeah, as you just said, I started the Green Mobility magazine, a magazine on sustainable transport and increasingly on sustainable transport policy a few years ago. But fundamentally, my interest in transport started when I was very, very young. My parents were diplomats, so I traveled quite a lot as a small child. I think aviation in particular was that link between my life in my home country, Canada, or accurately Quebec from my mom's side, and whatever country we're living in. So transportation was always that physical link between my past and my present, if you will. And that passion and interest grew and grew when I was a child. And I later even decided to do a master's degree in air transport management and later decided to do a few things related to it. And how could I say, voila, here we are. Magazine editor of the Green Mobility magazine, now co-host of Policy Driven, amongst other things.
Great. So we're looking forward to learning more about you and your background, and also your thoughts on contemporary and future transport challenges. And also looking forward to having guests. And over to you, Tom, to introduce our guest.
Well, absolutely. Speaking of guests, we are joined today by Sabrine Skiker. Sabrine is joining us in just a second right here. Hi, Sabrine.
Hey.
Hi,
good
Sabrine.
to be with you. Hi.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about you. So Mark and I, we were both transport nerds through and through. Would you share that nerdiness and that excitement about the transport industry, or did the transport industry choose you?
We chose each other. I'll put it this way. But yeah, I'm totally part of the Transport Nerds family, big time. And I can say, yeah, I mean, since I joined, since I started my career in Brussels, over 15 years ago, I have been working, in energy and mobility. At the time, if I may, when there was a DG that was actually combining both transport and energy in the European Commission. 8 years ago, up to the point that people realized we actually need to be stronger on those two topics. We need to build capacity. And I had the pleasure to be at the time when I started my career in DG, well, in both DGs actually. I am today a director in the public affairs agency, Hanover Communications. Where I'm director in our sustainability practice, and that of course includes mobility. I'm in this capacity for now 3 years and something, 3 years and a half, and this is all exciting.
Both of you, in addition to working on transport, you're both members of the Green Mobility Magazine editorial board, for which we're all extremely thankful. But then I guess
I'm extremely honoured, Tom, to have been asked to do that, because it's a great initiative. I know we're a bit biased because we're on your editorial board, but it really is. But it's really filling a gap in the policy space, I think. I don't know whether you agree, Sabrine, that we need more discussion in Brussels about not just the work program now for the coming year, but we need long-term holistic thinking on transport. And I think that's what your magazine facilitates, that sort of holistic thinking, looking at sustainability, but also looking at energy policy, looking at infrastructure, looking at all the different players. And it's not just EU either. It's a global challenge that we're facing.
You guys have a lot of experience, more than me in this, provided our relative ages. Do you think the transport sector is facing a big challenge these days? Do you feel it's undervalued by political actors and even businesses?
Sabrine? No, I wouldn't say that. Maybe in the past, yes. I mean, in the past, it was always, that it was not considered as important, maybe as other exciting sectors. But without transport, you don't go anywhere. Without this sector, and we saw it during COVID time, right? Remember when we were like, okay, we're stuck, we cannot transport any goods, any people, and that's it. So at the end of the day, I think there is a recognition. I mean, I think if you think about like the type of initiative, the strategic dialogues, and I mean, we'll get into the details later on. But yeah, I would say transport is higher on the agenda as it has been before. Now, whether if it's high enough, that's another question, right? And of course, if we're only talking, if we're talking automotive industry, yeah, this is like top of the agenda, like big time. If you're talking anything else and you're in transport mode, then I think we can have a discussion and around whether we are going far enough or not at this stage.
Mark, you were an MEP at one point. You were in the parliament voting on transport proposals. You're a member of the Tran committee. If I remember correctly, you also had some work with Tony. You were working on behalf of Tony Blair in the Tran committee and central government. At the time, do you think transport policy was well respected, or were you working during that transition phase between that?
I think Sabrine very diplomatically calls it the transition phase, from when it wasn't very important to when it's now more central to our economic and social future. So I was definitely there when it wasn't so important, I can assure you. And what Tran committee said so the argument was always, whatever Tran committee said in the plenary, the environment committee would inevitably amend successfully whatever we recommended. So we were always playing second fiddle to environment. And I think now, as Sabrine has indicated, it's now much more integrated. Both transport policy, energy policy, and sustainability policy, and indeed wider environmental policy. I think it's changed an incredible amount in the 20, 30 years since I was on that Tran committee. Some things, though, always remain the same, and I'll go into that maybe on this podcast or future podcasts. So some of the debates in Tran I now listen to were the same debates we were having 30 years ago. I mean, that's the shocking thing. Like, some of the problems of urban mobility, for example, comes to mind, with the same old problems of pollution, and congestion in particular. That's an issue I've always been passionate about, and we haven't really tackled that at all. In fact, it's got worse in 20, 30 years. Road safety, still a major problem in Europe. Over 20,000 people killed on our roads still every year. So I think we've made huge progress, particularly international connectivity, I think in decarbonisation, and meeting the needs of citizens in so many ways, particularly through technology. But yeah, some of the old debates, Tom, are still resonating around the halls of the Berlaymont and the European Parliament.
Wait, because I think when you said that, what came to mind is Shift to Rail.
Yeah,
that's also one that has been, going on for quite some.
Yeah, and shift away from rail in the case of rail freight. Yes, so it's that's probably one of Europe's real missed opportunities, I think, and we can come on to this again in future programs, that we haven't really exploited our rail infrastructure on the scale that we could, and this all links back to connectivity, but also competitiveness, that you need efficient railway systems to be a competitive economy. And we have one of the weaknesses of us against China or the US is that we are 27 fragmented transport systems, particularly in rail. Or at least that's my view. I know some would disagree with that, but I still think we have a patchwork quilt of a transport system in rail. Don't tell CER what I said.
I couldn't disagree, but you mentioned something else, which the same arguments come over and over again. And this, Sabrine, I just want to pick on you for a second, if I may. I understand you used to work in Hydrogen Europe when I started covering transportation 5-10 years ago. So I'm relatively new to the game. Hydrogen was the big thing. It also seems to be the future big thing. What's up with that? Well, you had a lot of experience. Was it a big thing when you were working in the hydrogen sector? Do you believe it could be the be and all and end all in 2025?
Well, I started working on hydrogen when hydrogen was really not known at all. It was the niche of the niche, I was calling it at the time. Some 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, I was working on deployment of hydrogen buses. And yes, hydrogen was really unknown. There was a lot of work to be done to educate people around, safety, it's not going to explode in your face. This is, and making the link with the energy as well, sectoral integration, all of those that became buzzword in the past mandate with the hydrogen strategy back in 2020. And then, Repower EU. And basically hydrogen became mainstream. When it comes to transport, then, of course, when I was working at Hydrogen Europe, I was supporting all transport modes, and the advocacy was that all transport mode would be powered by hydrogen. So probably, if anyone from the hydrogen sector listen to me right now, don't hate me, but I do not believe that hydrogen light vehicle is going to go, very far away in a very near future. While I do understand all the benefits because I've been rehashing them to the world.
You've been indoctrinated, Sabrine. That's it.
No, come on. I mean, there's a super nice hydrogen taxi hype in Paris. So that's a tribute to those guys. They're amazing. But besides this, besides some niche products, then the question is, what's the best use for the hydrogen sector? Where is it? And then that is hard to abate. And what are those hard to abate sector? And that's aviation, and that's maritime, and that maybe trucks, depending on the use case, depending on the business case, because we were also talking about industries that are very much TCO driven. And at the end of the day, we're now in a geopolitical and economical circumstances that make you think even more about every euro, or if I'm trying to adapt to the UK, every penny that you spend. Has to be worth it.
Which actually brings me on to my second point. Lack of international cooperation. As both of you will know, my job is really to follow the news on a day-to-day basis. And something that came across my desk, and perhaps everyone else's desks, was just following the EU's announcement for a clean industrial deal, which we'll get on about later. The US president announced that his administration would announce a 25% tariff on all EU imports. He claimed that the EU was formed to, and I quote, screw with the United States. And while the details are few and far between, it's anticipated that they'll be wide-ranging and universal. Trump did, however, outline cars. But before I'll ask you guys for your opinion. The European Parliament has published a report recently saying that in 2023, the EU had a surplus of 48 billion euros with the US, which sounds tremendous. But in reality, that's just about 3% of the 1.6 trillion euro trade floor with the United States. So what do you guys think about Trump's tariffs and the lack of international cooperation, to bring it back to our last conversation point?
Haha.
Sabrine.
Yeah, that's a good one. Obviously, I think we live in a different era where maybe our allies of yesterday may not remain the allies of tomorrow. The world is changing, and we have a US president that is, he said he would do it. He's doing it. I mean, the tariffs doesn't come as a surprise. I must say, I was actually checking, the share of the European car maker when it comes to how it went down following like the announcements that he made, not the one of the few weeks ago, but like back in when he came to the office. I mean, that in November, then again there was a peak of probably another announcement I cannot remember about in December, and then it's very shaky.
Yeah.
And here, I mean, it's something I saw I got from the FT. I mean, where it was about BMW, Volkswagen, and Stellantis, but I would assume for the rest, I mean, besides Tesla, which is a special case, then would be different. But what I would say here is that I think there is a bit of a fatigue from this like start-stop trade war. And right now, I mean, I was a bit surprised to see actually this market resilience. When I checked the number, I mean, I checked that this morning and I was like, okay, so there is also a lot of talking and then there is a lot of reality check also. But still, that being said, I mean, the guy is not stupid. Huh? I hear a lot about, Trump. I mean, it's not the same Trump we have in this mandate that we had in the first mandate, right? So he's using like the tariffs, among others, as a political tool, and that's it, and that comes, and that will. I'm not going to say that this is not going to do any harm. I don't know. Will he put the tariffs now? What did he say in April? I mean, very soon. Soon, and then at some point, I don't know. I saw April 2nd, but maybe speculations. I have no idea, to be honest. I don't think anyone else would have an idea. No. And here, I want to make 2 points. Is that everyone else but him, because the EU is trying to go into a dialogue. Like we had Sefcovic last week, going to the US, like talking to high-level officials in Trump's administration. But I don't think those guys know either.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you can have a very civilized conversation. It doesn't mean anything. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And then the second point is, well, what can the EU do? And here, the short answer, I'm sure we could have like 3 hours podcast on that, is that compared to the last mandate, we are in a different position. There are new trade mechanisms, there are new trade defense mechanisms that have been put in place in the past mandate. And I don't think this time the EU is like, we'll wait and see. I think the EU will answer. Now, are those trade defense mechanisms enough? And will it be quick enough? Mark, you can answer that question.
Yeah, no, I'm listening because I'm learning, Sabrine. I think it's fascinating, and particularly your points, I think, are really important to make, that none of this should be a surprise. Although we are surprised, we're shocked every day when you open the news, but we shouldn't be surprised because he said he would do this, and he's learned from the first term. He's hitting the ground running, and he's doing what he said he would do. So you're right. I mean, I think policymakers are probably a bit more surprised than the markets, because, as you say, the markets have been relatively stable because I think they've already built this in. They also know, like in Canada, and the tariff threat in Mexico, he's also, some of this is gesture politics, if you like. He's negotiating a bit like he is on, Gaza. It's a tactic. And I think the markets are building that in, and I think we are more ready for him. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you say. I mean, I think there's a few reflections that I've got on this. I mean, firstly, even the Americans think this is dumb. Firstly, I think we really have to make the point that tariffs are not a good idea, particularly for the people imposing the tariffs. I mean, so Wall Street Journal calls this the dumbest trade war in history. And this has forced me to do a bit of going back to my early days of studying economics. What is wrong with tariffs? So Trump wants two things out of tariffs. He wants the tariff to raise lots of revenue. And secondly, he wants industry to locate back to the US so they don't have to import goods. But if you think about it, you can't do both of them if you're successful. I mean, either you have loads of imports coming in, bringing in revenue, or the imports stop and you start making it at home, in which case you don't have any tariff revenue. So the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, there's no evidence because the people, the companies and organizations that pay the tariffs will be the Americans. So I think, first of all, we have to debunk the idea that tariffs work, because historically for decades it's proven they do not. And that's why I'm very proud in Europe to be supporter of free markets and free trade. Europe's incredibly well there. I think we've got 72 trade agreements now. We are the first principal trading partner with 78 countries. That's 38% of the world's GDP. We're an incredibly strong place on all of this. And that brings me on to my second point, which is a state of mind. And we're having this debate now with Trump over defense as well. Why are we always putting ourselves into a victim role? I mean, we are not a victim here. We're an equal partner with him, in my view, in my humble opinion. Certainly, when it comes to trade, I think we are we're in the top 3 world economies. Yeah, our trading relationships are stronger than theirs. 38% of world GDP. As they vacate markets, we can move in. So I think we should abandon the victim mentality, and we're having it over Russia as well. Europe is 10 times richer than Russia. Yeah. So I don't understand this problem where, oh my God, what are we going to do without the Americans? And that brings me to my third point, which I think links to yours, Sabrine, about defense mechanisms. We've got to step up to the plate and look after ourselves, but also support our values of free trade and trade with those people internationally, whoever we want to trade to. So I'm not being complacent or arrogant here, but I see these measures as self-defeating for the Americans and actually an opportunity for us pro-free trade Europeans. Come and trade with us, come and buy goods and services with us if you believe in free trade and free markets. This is Europe's moment, if you like. Maybe not the man on the moon moment, another moment.
We'll get back to that one as well.
So I'm actually inspired by this. I'm not saying bring it on, but it further erodes America's place in the world, in my view. They're just going to be diminished by this measure. We could actually be strengthened.
I'm always surprised by this question of mentality.
Sorry, I just wanted to react to the last bit. I guess that's really, it's a moment. Yeah, it's not the man on the moon moment, indeed, but it's really like the moment where we go 27 member states. Anyone? I mean, is it really it? And it's, yeah, it's a moment of truth as well, right?
28 if Canada joins at this stage.
Sorry?
28 if Canada joins at this rate.
Yeah, Quebec specifically, no?
It's Quebec specifically.
but I think that's exactly the point. So we've got to think out of the box now. This is Europe's moment, but we need to go beyond the framework that we've got at the present time, because it is, it's done a good job, but we need to have more. And I'm not just saying this because of the UK. I'm not saying we can cherry pick, but I do think maybe we need more dynamic international relationships with international partners that share our values and believe in free trade and free markets and the rule of law and the international, rule of law in particular. So maybe we need more dynamic relationships with Australia, with New Zealand, with the UK, with Canada, indeed anyone that will support us and we can support them. As you say, the old relationships, Sabrine, with the US, we've relied on them. In my view, I want to thank them. I think they've been great partners. I would rather we continue to be partners with them. But if they want to go on a different fork in the road, that's up to them. We respect that. We can stay on our course, building our own international partnerships. But I think that means we need to change maybe the governance mechanisms of the EU and go beyond 27.
I want to touch on this point which you both mentioned, which is this question of mentality. You're completely right. When it comes to Russia in a different space, we're like, oh, without an American security umbrella, we can't do anything. But I was talking to a friend of mine who's actually in the defense sector, and he said, if Russia today were to fight the British, the French, the Polish, and the Italians, and the Germans to some extent, but the Germans are relatively quite weak, they wouldn't last very long. We'd be able to hold our own very, very well for quite some time. But somehow we don't have the mentality. And the other aspect too is, what shocks me is the lack of education of the population when it comes, or the electorate, I should say, when it comes to this issue of tariffs. We saw it during Brexit. The first question after the Brexit referendum, what was the European Union? In America, we see it today. Tariffs, China is going to pay for the tariffs. No, China's not going to pay for the tariffs. It's consumers who are always going to pay for the tariffs. I don't know whose responsibility this falls under, but I find it, if I may, I find it disgusting that we've allowed our education, our social and civic education systems across the Western world to degrade to the extent where people don't even understand the basics of policy. Not everybody needs to be a specialist in this sector, but we need to have, I feel that societies, we need to have a better role in educating the electorate on relevant topics, especially since they have such a large impact on their lives. I don't know if you guys disagree, if you guys think I'm being insane. You can do both.
Never, Tom, don't worry, never.
I think this is opening a huge Pandora box.
Absolutely.
What I would like to say on that is that, let's say that with this podcast, we try to bring our little brick, our little piece to the whole, I mean, at least on the mobility side to see, to support and share some ideas.
I have one last fun fact on this topic, if I may. Do you know who the United States trade representative is? No. So he was just elected yesterday with a relatively tight vote of 56 to 43. His name is Mr. Jameson Greer. So what is interesting about Mr. Jameson Greer, you might ask? Well, Mr. Greer served under the Trump presidency as the chief of staff to trade representative at the time, called Robert Lightser, and he was until very recently an international trade specialist at a law firm in DC called King & Spalding. But more importantly, Mr. Greer completed 2 master's degrees in France, in Paris in particular, one at Sciences Po Paris and the other one at Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne, and he spent part of his youth as a Mormon missionary in Brussels. And if that wasn't enough, he's fluent in French and also worked as a clerk at the European Court of Justice. So I don't know what we did to Mr. Greer whilst he was here in Europe, but it seems that he is on his way back to Europe with a vengeance and 25% tariffs.
Oh my God, I'm French, so I'm going to make that one easy. Well, he spent too much time in Paris.
Only you can say that, Sabrine. I couldn't possibly comment.
That's why I was like,
there you go. Too much time in Paris, and now he's back with a vengeance of sorts against the Parisians. The European Commission yesterday launched a new project set to announce a handful of rules and laws and legislative initiatives and packages called the Clean Industrial Deal. You two follow this stuff more than I do. What was the idea initially behind the Clean Industrial Deal, which has been made headlines in Brussels for about the past couple of days? Sabrine.
Well, I think we cannot start. I think we need to take one step back and not go just for what happened in the last days, because the origin of this Clean Industrial Deal actually lies in the Green Deal at the time, in the past mandates. So in the past mandates, the Commission started, to go, yes, we are strong. And yes, we are going to make sure we become the first climate neutral continent. I mean, that was, if you think about 5 years ago, was really like, this is the headlines. And then COVID hits, the war hits, and there was no change in the direction of travel. That was it. I mean, we go Green Deal big time. But we still had a reality check with the Ukraine invasion, where we just started to realize, okay, we're getting skyrocketing prices and energy prices. Maybe we need to do something about our strategic autonomy. And remember that the moment where this open strategic autonomy became a buzzword in Brussels, then we had the IRA as well. So under Biden, so it went like, okay, Biden is boosting US green technologies. At the same time, we have China. So just China becoming the leader in green tech. I'm not going to tell you like about the solar panel story. That's, had everyone freaking out, and the whole supply chain point as well. So, okay, where does and access to raw materials. So all of that, so that was a context that led the previous commission to come up with a beautiful acronym. I'm not going to go with the acronym. I'm going to go with the Net Zero Industry Act. So that's brother, let's say, of the Clean Industrial Deal in a smaller scale. So we had the Net Zero Industry Act and the Critical Raw Material Act back in 23. And those were answers to the ERA, answers to all what I said earlier. And then we also had Repower EU on the energy side, like, well, we still go big on renewables, but thinking about, still the invasion. And to that, and after that, well, I think industry reaction to that has been just to say, okay, guys, this is great, but this is too little, too late, and also patchy. I mean, there is no clear vision in that there is no clear direction of travel. And you probably heard because, Ursula von der Leyen made the announcement about the Clean Industrial Deal in Antwerp, where there was an Antwerp declaration signed last year by, no, I forgot the number, but a huge amount of, hundreds. And then
200 to 500, if I'm not mistaken. It was really quite a lot.
See, so that number. No, but basically, and CEFIC, like the chemical industries under it, like going, okay, we need to push for a reality check. We need to be, it cannot be only about the environmental perspective, reality check, pragmatism, please. And then came the letter report, if you remember, another buzzword from last year, about simplification. Another even bigger buzzword was the Draghi report. Where that last year, September, where every single event in Brussels had the quotes on what the Draghi report said, like.
You mean the Draghi Bible?
But I mean, those were buzzwords, but I think this has been really the trajectory of the journey. We had, and of course, meanwhile, the elections and the change in the political dynamic and the change in the political agenda, where I think, I don't know if you would agree with me, but I think just saying the word Green Deal for some people became, like, wow, just don't mention it. If you say Green Deal, I'm just not going to listen to you, kind of, to be replaced by the keyword competitiveness. And then obviously, the geopolitical context, Trump, China, all I mentioned above. At some point, there was really this call for action. So we need to go for an action plan to support the EU industrial policy. So what it is about, what this Clean Industrial Deal is about is this. So how can we support EU businesses? How can we tackle the most pressing issues? And that came with the omnibus as well, which was the answer, if I'm really simplifying, the answer to LETA, and also tackling some of the elements from the Green Deal to go, okay, our due diligence requirement went a little bit too far away. Let's look at the scope, postpone the timeline, harmonize first, and then we take it from there. And then we can talk about the whole what was unveiled yesterday, of course, in more detail. But I think the history. But tell me, maybe I missed a bit. I don't know, but I think that was really the direction of travel. Since,
I think you've reminded us about what's been an incredibly busy year, hasn't it, in the last 12 months?
It's a lot.
So many initiatives and publications. I think people focused on Draghi, but then forgot about LETA. But also, the Net Zero Industry Act and all these things. I've jotted down here the phrase strategic autonomy, which goes back several years now. This is a long history, Sabrine, which you are very accurately bringing together and sharing with us. So thank you for doing that. I don't normally want to do this on podcast, but I can't resist quoting Draghi from last week in the European Parliament, where he said this. Because obviously he's been bringing a lot of the things together. You mentioned, Sabrine. He said that this is to Europe's leaders. You say no to public debt, he said. You say no to the single market. You say no to create a capital markets union. You can't say no to everything. You ask me what's best to do. I don't know, he said, but do something. And I think the Clean Industrial Deal, at least it's something. Yeah, it may not be everything, but it's a building block. It's a piece in the jigsaw, and it brings together all the elements that Sabrine has so eloquently highlighted for us. That I think we've got to look at it, as you say, in the context of a long journey, It's not an initiative in isolation on its own. It's got to be taken into context. And in context, I actually think it's a very, very important step forward. And what happens next, of course, it matters, but it sets a framework for industry that we haven't had before. And why is that? And I really believe passionately about this. We can decarbonize Europe. We don't need to backslide on that, but we have to reindustrialize at the same time. And in fact, I would argue, you can't have one without the other, which is where America's going wrong now, because they're going to reindustrialize, producing old equipment and providing old services that no one in the world will want anymore, that will be provided more cost effectively and better by the Chinese, as we're seeing in Europe with electric vehicles, if I may say so. So I think Clean Industrial Deal is a great way of bringing everything together, as Sabrine said, and providing a framework within which now we can get on and deliver it. And that's the point Draghi makes. The member states are the ones that have to deliver this. And that's the challenge, because of the governance structure of the EU really gives, despite what people think, gives the power to the member states on budget and capital, etc. It gives power to member states. So let's see what the member states, how they react.
But I think you forgot something very important there, which is, whilst the EU gives the power to member states, the existence of the EU gives the member state the power to blame the EU for everything that goes wrong, which is probably why we have such
a cynic, Tom, such a cynic.
Oh, just a little bit. It's why I live in France and not in Belgium, to allow me to be cynical. I can see Sabrine nodding her head. Just to go back even a few weeks, if not months ago, this Clean Industrial Deal, and we'll look in the detail in a second, but was meant to be this man on the moon moment. It was briefed in the media. I get all the press releases. This is going to be the thing. I think some of the very popular EU-focused media made it sound like it was going to be the announcement of the century. A bit of a dud.
Okay, media need to leave. Like they need to get, people reading their newsletters and their things, and voila. I think we just love to complain. Oh. And again, I'm going to bring the French hat here. I mean, well, it's a roadmap.
Sure.
So it's a roadmap that brings under the same umbrella key building blocks. Now, obviously, we have to see how those key building blocks, and always develop into the details, right? To see how that's unroll and what's will actually be taken as in terms of legislative in terms of legislation. So we have to see. But overall, I mean, this is answering, it's raising questions, of course, but the whole affordable energy. I mean, affordable energy was really a keyword since 22, since the invasion, and what do we do with that? And here there are some ideas, there are really some elements in the Clean Industrial Deal that go for how do we still keep, getting our renewable energy targets, right? We keep that, but at the same time, we try to help all manufacturing processes to decarbonize. I think that's there, and that's actually good. If we're being specific about the EV sector, in terms of electrification, there is finally there's this grid that everyone has been talking about for the past years. There's great. Oh, now we have the car. Okay, then the question is, are they coming from China or not? Blah blah. But okay, there are some EVs. Oh well, the infrastructure. Oh, but then the big issue is a grid, and how do we? So well, now we have a grid package. Okay, it's in 26, but now there is hopefully this will help accelerating, the grid, the electrification, the infrastructure, the big infrastructure hustles that we're facing. So you don't have everything, but that's one I want to flag, because I think for the transport sector, it's actually, and not only for the transport sector, actually for all businesses. I mean, this one is quite important. That of course there is a whole made in the EU bits, right? I mean, Yes, and on that one, I mean, of course, I mean, with Element to try to support EU manufacturing, and then again, I mean, hydrogen getting, yeah, I mean, being well quite known there. But then there is a question about the local contents.
Yeah.
How ready are we in the EU? Question mark. It's a good idea, but we have to see because there's those measures to promote local content criteria, you know, like for both public and private buyers of those green products. We have to see what does it mean in practice.
Quote the CID, the SID, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So it writes on lowering energy bills. It says, as average energy prices in Europe are higher than those of our trading partners, securing affordable energy is a key condition to the competitiveness of our industry, especially energy-intensive sectors. Now, I did study law, so I do like words. I'm also an editor, but when I read that, it sounds like there's no desire, at least in that paragraph, to de-intensify the energy intensity of our sectors, but rather securing affordable energy. Do you think that the clean industrial deal is not as clean as some would have hoped? Mark, we haven't heard from you.
No, I still think we're on course. I think in some areas we've gone faster than projected, which is great. In some areas we are behind, like the sectors you mentioned. Steel production comes to mind, because that delicate balance between decarbonizing and just losing your steel plants, as we are across much of Europe. I think that's where we probably do need to push the pause button, if we're honest, until we work out how to move to electric furnaces in a way that's affordable, because the electricity is so expensive. I think the latest statistics I saw from the European Environment Agency is that by 2030 we would have decarbonized Europe by 49%. Now it should be 55, as we know, the famous Timmermans Fit for 55 will be 49% of the way there. I think that's pretty damn good. So again, I think, as Sabrine said, there's a lot of negative thinking going around Europe, a lot of beating ourselves up, a lot of complaining. I think 49% compared to a 55% target. So I think on the whole, we've done a pretty good job decarbonizing. Transport has actually been one of the laggards, and I'm sure we want to come on to that. Some have done really well, but a lot of transport has not decarbonized at pace. But overall, our society has done pretty well. So I think we start the clean industrial deal actually in a strong position. I come back to my earlier point. I think some of this is about confidence. We need to restore confidence in Europe, because that's actually going to attract the private capital we need to invest in the innovative technologies of the future. And if we keep running ourselves down, talking ourselves down, we are not going to attract investment from within or from outside of the EU. The final point I would say, which I think always gets forgotten, and they are the people that are left behind. I don't think we have enough focus on that in the clean industrial deal. Remember the mantra, no one will be left behind. I think we've got to make that a reality, because we can't develop and deliver the industrial deal unless we take everyone with us. And that's something I think probably we've got to focus on more as Europeans.
One topic we did mention right there was, the transport industry hasn't really decarbonized fast enough. And in order to, I guess, support that, the CID has put a lot of emphasis on hydrogen, something which we alluded to earlier. But specifically, they want to de-risk and accelerate the uptake of hydrogen production in the EU. And the Commission will launch a third call under the Hydrogen Bank in Q3 2025, so relatively soon, with a budget of, again, my lawyer hat on, up to 1 billion euros. Who knows, it could be anything from €1 to 1 billion euros. Do you think that's really what we need? Do we just need more public funds going on into private enterprise, or is this the wrong approach?
But it's not really what it is, no? I mean, at the end of the day, because there is this 100 billion, right, that are being put on the table, quote, but that are not really necessarily made of like new public money. I mean, a lot of it is money that is already coming from the EU, but I mean, it's about reallocating it. So and it's a lot about leveraging private investments. So overall, so we have to see if we can support innovative industry for sustainable investment in the next MFF.
I feel like we have a very odd relationship with business in European and many, social democratic countries. On one side, when you listen to politics, political actors saying, we'll increase tax on business because they have money. That's partially true. It's not true for a bunch of SMEs who are struggling. It's not true for startups, but it's true for a very small minority. And I don't feel like policymakers and governments across the world have gotten it right when it comes to finding that balance. How do you incentivize businesses, large businesses who have the cash to invest and to support social products or products of social importance, whilst also maintaining a competitive and an open environment for smaller businesses who might not have as much capital. A great example is the cheap answer to how to pay for social services and investments is increased corporation tax, and that's been the case in many countries as we've seen. This is not what the EU is proposing, but I think we do really need to have tools that are tailored to try to really unlock the capital where it exists and not try to overburden SMEs and smaller enterprises as well. And the reason I bring that up is that they actually do mention it in the CID. It says the Clean Industrial Deal will serve as a framework for engaging in a dialogue with industries with attention for the SMEs to develop a sectoral transitional pathways. So I personally am quite glad to see that SME aspect. I guess the last one, please, Sabrine, you want to bring something up?
Just to say, because that's also omnibus. I mean, that's also really like the purpose of the omnibus. Like to look into how can we simplify and reduce, like this red tape. And ages ago, I worked in the SME Association in Brussels, and at the time, it was all about cutting red tape already. But it feels like now it's a different level of awareness on what needs to be done. So I'd like to bring that positive approach because I do see that in this omnibus, and it's just the first package, the first out of 3 packages that will come, and that should hopefully play this role in like making it easier for businesses and going into changing a little bit the mentality that we were talking about, the mentality issue, if I can quote you, that you were talking about earlier. I guess maybe just to say, because we could have spent 2 hours on this.
Absolutely.
at least, yeah.
It's a lot, but just to say other keywords, I think, from the Clean Industrial Deal, without going into the detail, it's all about like circular economy and recycling, and how can we support, recycling in the EU for the EU, kind of, like tackling then the critical raw material aspect that we mentioned earlier, and that's really something that I found really interesting to see what we can do in practice,
Sure.
And then of course there is we touched upon previously about partnerships. That's really big, like leveraging partnerships, not just the FTAs, but other ways, to partner with third countries. What we do with CBAM, that's also going to be big, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, to simplify it, but also like extend the scope at some point. And then there is actually a pillar to come back to what you said earlier about skills. Also, I mean, there is a pillar on what do we do with skills, and also, I mean, from a transport nerd perspective, the leasing bids for EVs. Looking at the French, everyone is talking about this French, like the mechanism that France had, which was so successful they had to stop it after a few months, actually. But something in that area. And then, of course, what has been missing is that we have also, you have probably seen from reaction from transport stakeholders is aviation and maritime, and like on SAF, for example. Like accelerating, support from alternative fuels, and that will come hopefully in the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan that's coming up later in Q3 this year. So I'm just to add a couple of other elements that were in the Clean Industrial Deal that I think were relevant for the transport sector as a whole, to be a bit more comprehensive. And I give you back the floor.
I'm very cognizant of time, if I may. I just want to talk about the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. As we know, it was Tsiki Kostas's headline plan when he became commissioner. I hope I said his name correctly. It fumbles me every single time. At first it was meant to come up earlier this year, and then got kicked down the road to Q3. I'd like to note that in the CID, it's not actually mentioned. There's no date for it in the CID, as far as I'm aware. But if you could have a magic ball, I guess I ask both of you as our transport policy nerds, and I include myself in there. If you could have a magic ball and you could write one thing in the CI, in the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan, that you think would really unlock investment or really push sustainable transport further, what do you think it will be, and what do you think we will get instead? Mark.
Oh, damn, I thought Sabrine was going to have to go first, which...
no, she just talked, so now I guess
it's going to give me a bit more time to think of a good answer to a very good question, but I'll do my best. I think it's... well, if I may, there's a question you haven't asked me, which you should, which is, how can we make this plan, when it does come out, more effective? And I think that's by making the process of constructing it more transparent than the CID, if I may say. So one thing that's lacking about the Clean Industrial Plan is there wasn't a proper stakeholder engagement and consultation process. Yeah, they're almost doing it now it's out. I think it would have been stronger if there'd been more consultation in developing it. I know everyone sent in their observations, and there's been hundreds and thousands of discussions about it, but I think there does need, for the STIP, the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan, we need to engage all the stakeholders from transport, but also particularly from the financial markets. And that brings me on to my key point. What do I want to see in it? I want measures that will release the private capital and equity that exists in Europe already, because we're a very wealthy continent. Yeah, we've got a lot of money here. We should stop complaining about how we're poor. You know, we're a small continent. We need the Americans or the Chinese. You know, we're up there. We were the first, second, or third richest part of the world, depending on how you measure it. So how do you release that equity? But it's not distributed equally, as we know. So how can you release that equity from the private sector to inject into, for example, those fuels of the future, hydrogen, for example, or the infrastructure? So that's what I want to see. What do I expect to see? Well, I think the same old thing with Europe, that it'll be a step in the right direction, because that's how we are. We're Europeans. Yeah, we always do things largely by consensus, not through shock therapy, which maybe we need now, and maybe we haven't got long to react to Trump, as Sabrine was saying right at the beginning. But it's the European way. You know, we like to move slowly, build a consensus, and then move forward. And to be fair, that's been largely successful for 80 years since the Second World War. So but will it be fast enough? I think only time will tell. Because I don't think we've got. Well, my prediction is this, and then I'll shut up, that we have until the next European elections to deliver some of this. Yeah, if we don't deliver some of the benefits that we've been promising in terms of new jobs, new skills, new transport services, new confidence in the future, then we're really in trouble. Yeah, we really are in trouble. So we've got this window of 4 years to get our act together. And I'm optimistic we can do that.
Yeah, Sabrine, if you want, I have some idea. I have an idea, actually.
Yeah, no. I mean, I just wanted to maybe to wrap up as well by saying that at the end of the day, I mean, you said we have 5 years. I think we don't have 5 years. It's like now. I mean, and I think there is something on the Clean Industrial Day that, or in the omnibus. No, I forgot, which is about a fast track procedure. So basically, for the deforestation law, the fast track procedure has been used. You like it or not, it was quick. It was, and that it was effective. If you take the CRMA, top of my head, I mean, it was unveiled in March, and then there was an agreement in December. Well, or something like that. I mean, or 1 year agreement, at least short term, really quick and effective process from an EU bubble perspective, where usually
relatively.
So what I would love to see in this mandate is more of those fast tracks, because we cannot spend another 2.5 years trying to get into a compromise. Speed is of the essence here. I mean, the rest of the world is not waiting for you or for me. You know, that's it. So voilà, that's my my key message.
No, I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, I think you're right to challenge this, because actually we're too used to in Europe working on 5-year cycles, and maybe you're right. This time we haven't got 5 years; we've got more like 5 minutes. Yeah, but we just got to get our ducks in the row in Brussels in a way we've never done before, and move really, really fast. I mean, that's why I think Trump is. I know this is a heresy to say. Maybe Trump's a good thing, because it's going to promote European solidarity and cooperation on the scale we've never seen before, because we have to work together to counter, for example, his tariffs, and we can't wait for months or years to do that. We've got to do it now. So yeah, your point, I think, is a powerful one, that we're almost ripping up the old rule book. We need a new, faster rule book.
From my perspective, in the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan, what I would kind of want is, and again, I'll commit heresy as well, is have some Doge style, EU institution that would really go in and support projects of all sizes that communities across Europe want to implement to make transport more equitable, sustainable, accessible, and competitive. And really go and give the full weight of the European Union behind these projects to enable communities of all sizes to really, to use a British term, level up their transport. And I think that would be really useful for citizens who don't really see the benefits of Europe and the European Union today, especially the most hard to reach regions.
So to use your own words, Tom, that's what you want, but what do you expect? None
of that. None of that. Paperwork and long-term planning, which leads to
so what we're lacking, maybe we need a European Elon Musk, yeah.
Perhaps that could be us three.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! You're dropping that one at the end of the podcast.
We have to have more episodes.
Can we edit that one out?
I think that's a topic. That's your second topic for the next podcast. No?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need a European.
Do we need a European? So, Sabrine, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the first episode ever of Policy Driven. It's really been a pleasure. I'm sure we will have you on soon again. And thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been an honor. Thanks a lot. And to the next one.
Tom. And thanks, Sabrine. And we all look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
And everyone watching, don't forget to like, share, and comment above all.
Absolutely. And subscribe.
And subscribe. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.